I think it's also important to note too that, if you are going through the program and you're feeling overwhelmed, it's normal and it's okay, and that you're not alone in that. I think when you try anything new, that especially things that you don't know, it can feel very overwhelming because you think, oh my gosh, there's all this information I didn't know. There's so much. But what's really great about Zivli is that, when you become a member, you're a member for life. So all of this information, all of the support you have for a lifetime. So, going into not only our program, but any form of health journey, is that it doesn't have to be overnight, right? This is a lifestyle change that you are implementing for the rest of your life. You have the rest of your life to work on this, right? And I think in the same vein, unhealthy habits or kind of what led you up into this point also didn't happen overnight.
Hey there, and welcome back to part 2 of this episode on the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and our guest is Dr. Lydia Spirawk. She is one of our Zivli Health coaches, a dear friend. I am so grateful that you're back on the show. This one is going to be talking about more obstacles, more limiting thoughts, more excuses that we hear when people are considering joining Zivli, which opens very soon. We only open our program a couple times per year. We're taking new members very, very soon in mid-September. So keep listening to the podcast. If you're on our email list, you'll definitely hear about that as well. But we wanted to just have some conversation around the top excuses that prevent people from taking the action they know they need to take, they want to take to improve their health. And a common one that we hear is, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Or they may not say that out loud, but they're thinking that. So when you hear somebody saying, I don't know if I'm ready for this, like this might be too much for me, what kind of goes through your mind on that one?
For me, and the people that I've either coached or talked to or family or friends, that the thinking or the question comes up of, well, if not now, then when, right? We can't predict life fully. And, today is a better day than tomorrow, than 6 months from now, 6 years from now. I think if we go in with that mentality of, I'm not ready for this with everything in life, we would never end up doing anything, right?
It's true. I think it kind of goes to like, name another time in your life where you weren't ready for something and you didn't anyways. Like, no one's ever really ready to take the baby home, to have the baby from the hospital. Like, what? No one is ever ready for that first fight after you're married. Like, no one is ever ready to have their first negative experience at work. Like, I remember when I was working as a PT, like your first fall, he was literally sitting in a wheelchair and slid off. He considered a fall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, your heart just sinks. And you're like, you're just not ready for that. But we do it anyways. And so I would challenge anybody who's thinking to themselves, I'm not ready for a change. I'm not ready for this program. Maybe it's too comprehensive or too intense for me. That's your brain trying to keep you safe. And we're going to be digging into that today. And remember, you are resilient and you are capable. And it doesn't really matter if you feel ready. I think that's the bottom line here, is feeling ready is irrelevant. Like, we don't care if you feel ready. We care if you're committed. And if you're 100% committed to improving your health, you can be 10% ready, 15% ready, 50% ready, or 100% ready, and we can work with that commitment. So I wanted to kind of shift that. Like, let's stop focusing on the feeling of how you're feeling and start focusing on the facts. Like, you need to be committed to improve your health. In the last conversation, we talked a lot about values, and we want health to be a top value of yours. And so when you have health as a central core value and you have commitment, you're going to be unstoppable. Like, it's okay if you don't feel ready. And then the other thought that popped in my head is like, you're probably never going to feel ready. Like, I have never, ever, ever talked to somebody who joined our program who was like, I just was in such a good place and I had so much free time. And I thought to myself, how do I want to spend all of this free time? No, it's like there's always stuff going on, even after you retire. Like, yeah, you may have some more free time, but chances are you're going to have aging parents or grandkids to help take care of, or you're working a fun job, or you have health problems, or your spouse has health problems. There is always going to be something. And so I really encourage people to not use the I don't feel ready as an excuse to not take action towards your health goals. So
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think kind of piggybacking off of your last comment of, I'm not ready for this. Imagine if you don't take that next step forward, you don't commit, and 3 years from now, you end up having a heart attack or a stroke, or you end up having you end up getting diabetes, and that leads to, renal failure, and now you are having dialysis multiple days a week, right? You'd be saying to yourself, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for my life to change so drastically, So, and I know that's an extreme, it sounds like an extreme situation to think about, but that's the reality of a lot of people in our country. And I would much rather be not ready to start a health journey that scares me than deal with the consequences of poor health choices and end up in the hospital or worse.
or worse. Yeah. And I think that goes into the next kind of excuse that we see, or not maybe excuse, but maybe just a limiting thought. I'm overwhelmed. I am just overwhelmed. And if you're going to join, and I hope that you do, and when you do, you may experience that feeling of overwhelm. And we address that up front in our new member call, and we talk you through, different thoughts that really help combat that overwhelm. We've designed our program intentionally. We've actually lengthened it from 8 to 12 weeks to help reduce that overwhelm. We've added some group coaching calls. But mainly it's just progress over perfection, and, having that growth mindset and releasing the expectation of perfection, I think helps with the overwhelm. But also think about what you just said. Like, is it more overwhelming to face your fears and learn new information and change your lifestyle? Or is it more overwhelming to think about where you're going to be if you don't do that? Because can you kind of share some of your work experience?
Yeah, for sure. So for those who don't know, I'm also a physical therapist, and I work a few times a month at a neuro clinic. So we specialize in patients that have had strokes or brain injuries. The bulk of the conditions are ones in which they were preventable. And so we, especially the last 5 to 10 years at my clinic, we have seen a shift in the number of patients, not only the number of patients having strokes, but the age range of those strokes. It used to be pushed more, 50 to 70 range, and we're seeing the bulk of our stroke patients between 40 and 60. And that's very young. That's incredibly young. And, it's very emotional working with these patients and their family members, and their life is completely changed. I think especially about the young patients that are kind of in that middle generation where they're still raising children and they just had a massive stroke. They can no longer work their job. They are now a single income family. They do not know how they're going to bring money in. They don't know how the family members don't know how they're going to take care of their mom or dad now. And it's a situation that I don't wish upon anyone. And it's the reality of a lot of people whose health has not been a priority for years and years and years and years and years. And when I talk to them, it's, for a lot of people, it's kind of, if their stroke it was minor, it's like the kick in the pants that they needed to say, okay, this stops, the smoking stops, the drinking stops, the not prioritizing my physical health stops. It has to stop. Otherwise, I'm going to be right back in the hospital. And yeah, it's very humbling to see on, from my end, seeing the patients and the families go through that. But it also goes to show, I've seen those people who have gone through an event like that and completely transformed their life completely. And, they are then advocates of, be preventative, do the things you need to do now to not get to that point. And it is really sad that it sometimes takes those massively traumatic events to happen to say, okay, now I'm ready.
Right. And I think we can learn from other people's experience. I really believe like this collective mind of like, we don't have to wait for something to happen to us to learn. We can learn from other people's experiences, and I hope that you do. And I hope that whether or not you join Zivli, because our enrollment opens very soon, you take some major action, because being a passive listener is not enough. You also have to be an action taker. Be continuously in action, trying to improve yourself, trying to grow, trying to be preventative, because then this is the way that I look at it, Lydia, is it may still happen to me. I may still have a stroke. I may still get dementia. I may still have a heart attack. However, if I do that, I won't spend an ounce of my energy or time in regret, and I won't have any doubts about whether or not I could have done more to prevent this and the burden that I am on my family.
And likely during that time, you've also lived your life right? Like you've lived your life fully, actively, during that time.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's like the best. I love using health and money analogies together, because it's like, if you want to retire someday and not work, you have to be investing now. You have to let that money grow over time. But the difference when you're talking about health and money is you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor all the way up until retirement and through retirement. It's not something that you have to wait to withdraw.
Yep.
So I really like that analogy too. So thanks for sharing some of that experience, and I hope that that touch people. I think I sometimes think about, like, why don't people do, like, why are we so passionate about this, whereas other people are just kind of like living their life and letting those limiting thoughts control them, or being a victim of their circumstances, or procrastinating making the change. And I think that we have a very unique perspective as geriatric physical therapists, because people who have had strokes, people who have dementia, people who are very ill, they live in the shadows. They're not out and about in the grocery store. They're not going to the games because they can't. And I think for a lot of people, it's out of sight, out of mind. And I want it to be in their sight, especially when they're thinking about feeling overwhelmed. It's like, this is little. This is a little bit of overwhelm. We've seen very big levels of overwhelm from big health issues. So please, please, please learn from our experience and take control of your health. Take responsibility for your health as soon as.
I think it's also important to note too that, if you are going through the program and you're feeling overwhelmed, it's normal and it's okay, and that you're not alone in that. I think when you try anything new, that especially things that you don't know, it can feel very overwhelming, because you think, oh my gosh, there's all this information I didn't know. There's so much. But what's really great about Zivli is that, when you become a member, you're a member for life. So all of this information, all of the support you have for a lifetime. So, going into not only our program, but any form of health journey, is that it doesn't have to be overnight, right? This is a lifestyle change that you are implementing for the rest of your life. You have the rest of your life to work on this, right? And I think in the same vein, unhealthy habits or kind of what led you up into this point also didn't happen overnight. So you can't expect things to change, in a day as well. It's okay if it's overwhelming, but keep showing up, keep showing that commitment, just keep going.
I think also changing how you think about the emotion in the first place is helpful. So like, instead of saying I'm overwhelmed and that's a bad thing, you could say overwhelmed and that's a good thing, because it means that I care and it means that I'm learning and I'm expanding and I'm growing. So I love that subtle language shift of, instead of I'm overwhelmed, you can immediately catch that and say, nope, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm expanding, I care. So I think helping people change their language around overwhelm really.
I agree.
All right. This is the next kind of common one that we hear is, okay, well, what can I learn from your program that I can't learn from Google? And I'm like, that's a valid question. We have so many YouTube videos. We have so many podcast episodes. We give away a ton of information for free. And what I like to kind of explain to people is that information is piecemealed. And our program is that full A to Z systematic approach of how do I really implement this lifestyle? And it's an experience. Like, this is not just content. This is relationships. This is help. This is somebody to answer your questions when you need, who has the experience and knowledge required to answer those questions. But more importantly, it's like, you can only Google what you don't know. And so often, it's not what you don't know that's the problem. Like, okay, how do you Google what you don't know you don't know? You can't. You can't. And I think in the blood sugar boot camp, people will, be listening hopefully to that. We'll air it on the podcast. But register so you don't miss out on the trainings. We talk a lot of, like, I'm actually getting into cholesterol a little bit in this boot camp and the difference between LDL particle number and LDL cholesterol. And many people listening to that are just like, right over my head. They don't even know what LDL particle number is. They're on a statin. They don't even know if they should be on this statin, really. Because if you're Googling like cholesterol, you probably don't even know that LDL particle number exists. And so how do you solve a problem if you don't even know like what question?
I think that's what's also beneficial about coaching, because a lot of times when you're a part of, a one-on-one coaching session, your coach can help to guide you to maybe realize some of these blind spots that you didn't even know you had. And everybody has them.
Yes, us included. I think that the way I think about Google too is it's like groupthink. And a lot of the information on Google is inaccurate. Like, I can Google what are the best foods for diabetes? What are the best foods for prediabetes? And I guarantee you whole grains are going to be at the top of the list. Grains are a starch and they will spike your blood sugar. That should not be on the list. You can include whole grains in your diet, but they're not one of the best foods for diabetes and prediabetes. So there's so much misleading information on Google, and it can be very confusing to try to navigate that, especially if you don't have like previous knowledge or expertise in this. So if people are like, well, I'm just going to watch all the YouTube videos and listen to all the podcasts and I'm going to just do this on my own, you can, and it's also going to take you a lot longer, and you may still be missing a lot of the pieces. And I feel for you. I feel for you because I put the program together, so I know how much work it was to just let it all sink in.
And going about it that way, there's just not a whole lot of structure to it, and it can be very time consuming, confusing to be, you watch one video and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to go watch another one. Where do I get that information? Who is this person? Versus evidence-based, researched program step by step where you can gather the information. You can listen to it over and over and over again for life. You've got physical resources, at your disposal too. It's just very different.
It is. I like to think of it as if you're going to do this on your own through Google and YouTube and my podcast, whoever else, books, it's kind of like you're in the jungle and you have to get from point A to point B, a 5 mile hike. Let's just say, why not 5 miles? But there's no trail. You have to cut your own trail. You have to bring your shears. You got to cut the trail. You have to scoop it out. You have to maneuver around the obstacles. Maybe there's a river here and there and you have no idea about it. It's going to take you forever.
I'm not going on that hike.
No, like who wants to go on that hike? Versus our program kind of like gives you that trail through the woods, the trail through the trees, so that you can have a proven, previously traveled path by an expert guide you through point A to point B.
I
That's
like that analogy. That's good. I think you also have to think about, where you are getting that information from. If you're just getting random information from Google, is it from someone that has their credentials, has gone through school, has sat through board exams, or is it just a popular website, a popular influencer, and I think it's the age of social media and the internet. It's both a blessing and a curse. It's great that we have so much information at our fingertips, but it also then can be easy to get sucked into the mud and not be able to know what's the right path to follow.
Mm-hmm. And distraction.
Yeah.
Like that for me, I have joined several online programs to learn more and to fill gaps in my skill set and my knowledge. And I love them because I can focus learning. It's not like I'm listening to a podcast or just like you said, like, okay, how am I going to find the next piece of information that I know? It's already laid out there. It's already organized for me. And I just click play. And I trust that because this person has gone before me, because I trust that they know what they're talking about, they're going to give me what information I need to know in what order. And that saves me so much time, so much second guessing on like, is this information going to work or is this information legit? And I think that's one of the biggest blessings of like an online course, like what we have for Zibly, is it reduces the distractions and you don't have to be going. I tell people straight up, I'm like, please do not listen to the podcast. Please do not watch the YouTube videos. Please do not read audiobooks. Go through this program, reduce your distractions, because that way you don't have that conflicting information coming in and you guard your energy and attention. And that helps reduce overwhelm too, especially.
Well, if you have so much input coming in at once, they've actually scientifically proven we're not able to multitask. No matter what moms say, you actually can't, right? You can increase the speed in which you are shifting your attention between tasks, but the ability to actually multitask you can't. Your brain cannot do that. And so, you owe it to yourself to be present and take the time to actually learn and sit through the material.
Yep. And soak it in. And like you said, like this is not a one and done thing. We members watch lessons like 4 times and they get something new out of every single time they watch the lesson because they are so in depth and they're so, sometimes they're just rich and they're deep. Other times they're very in depth and scientific and there's something that they want to read out of them again. So that's kind of our answer for like, why don't I just Google it? And then the last one that we hear is, I have to talk to my partner first. And we're going to speak to this as if it's a wife wanting to talk to her husband, because that's the most common scenario here. We get this a lot, if we're doing a discovery call with a potential new member and they're like, this sounds great. I need to talk to my husband first. I'm always just like, if your husband was making this decision, would he run it by you?
If the roles were reversed.
I think that sometimes I have to talk to my husband it's almost like they're asking for permission to be worthy, or they're asking for permission to spend money on themselves, or they're asking for validation that they can do it. And I always just, I feel for them because I've had to have conversations with my husband and I have felt like I didn't know how to explain it very well, of like why I want to do this, why I want to spend this money. And he may have a differing opinion about that. And so I think what's important for people to know is like your husband doesn't need to be supportive to give you the blessing, you know? And sometimes you have a really good example of like a husband who wasn't really on board and like reluctantly did, like, we have a 2-for-1 deal where if you join, you can have your partner join too at no cost. You have to live in the same physical address. But so they did that, and tell us what happened.
So they did it together, and you know, I met both of them, spoke with both of them. The wife was very on board from the get-go. The husband was definitely resistant, I think is a good term from the beginning. But within, I mean, a couple weeks of the course, he was fully on board. He had gotten through all the course material. He had implemented all, you know, everything, and he had done like a complete 180. So it was just so funny, you know, and they both had a lot of success, you know, by the end of the program. But it was just so funny because, you know, I think it's easy to assume, you know, oh, my partner might react in, you know, a certain way. You know, there's no way I could do this. They're not going to want me to do this. But you have no idea. They may want to join you just as much or more.
And I think how you come about saying it means a lot to you. Like, I know if I come up to my husband and I'm like, honey, there's been something that's been on my heart and it's really important to me. And I know you may not completely be on board and you may not agree with me, but this is very important for me and I want your blessing anyways. Let me explain it to you. That's going to go a lot better than, hey, can I talk to you about something? Or, hey, there's this program I want to join. And so I think if you come at it from a place of love and set it up like that, like, this is important to me. I understand you may not agree or you may not like it. However, I think that it's ultimately going to help me be a better wife or better mom, et cetera, et cetera. Like, come from a loving place of their people will have in your choice. And so be confident that you're worth it. Be confident that you're worth the investment of your time and your money and your attention. And recognize that whatever your spouse says a lot more about them than it does about you. And any response is usually like from a place of love or fear. And so I like to walk people through this just so they kind of know what to expect. So the loving, you know, they may be supportive. Fantastic. Like, we see couples go through this all the time and they have such great results together. And I always love hearing those stories because they did it as a team. However, maybe you've tried different things and you're discouraged and sad and depressed, and you're just like, you know, complaining to your husband about how fat you feel and how none of your clothes fit anymore, and you don't want to go out to eat on dates, and it's a miserable experience for both of you in that case. And they saying, are you sure you want to do this, honey? Remember last time you did this? Maybe we should just like do something else. They're trying to keep you safe emotionally. And so recognize it them, right? Because happy wife, happy life. When wife isn't happy, like, no one's happy. And then the other thing too is it could be coming from a place of fear, especially if they're very discouraging. They may themselves be unhealthy, and they may be fearful about, okay, if she makes these changes, how does that change our relational dynamic? Am I not going to be good enough for her anymore? Am I not going to be attractive enough for her anymore? Is she going to make me eat all this health food? You know, who's going to take care of me? Like, I think a lot of women assume that caretaker role, and their husbands are used to essentially them like bending to their every will and whim, at least like in the generation that we tend to serve. And it's almost like if they do something for themselves, that takes away something from their husband. Like, that's kind of how the husband feels, is like, by you investing in yourself, you're taking something away from me.
It's like that analogy of pouring from an empty cup, right? You know, if you're completely drained, there's no more water in it. You can't pour any more, you know, in order to fully be present for, your husband, your family, yourself. You've got to put water or whatever in your cup before you pour it. Otherwise everybody's thirsty.
Use that, like, rewind this, listen to how I said it, model that language to your spouse, number one, than you. It has nothing to say about your capacity for change or your capability in doing this. Their belief in you is not required. Bigger and harder than anybody else believes in you. So if you're not there yet, go through the program with you and learn with you. And you guys can do this together and be each other's, like, accountability partners and teams. And it will be such a relation, like a relation did it together. My dad is a hard nut to crack. It significantly helped his diabetes. It's just done wonders for his cognitive health. I hope that if you're considering joining, this gave you some good, helpful advice of how you.com. We're happy to answer any of your questions. Just remember, a lot of information about the program will be coming out on the podcast in the upcoming week.